Why is it that the kindest people often suffer the most? The most polite, the most forgiving, the ones who never raise their voice, never break the rules, never fight back. They're the ones overlooked, manipulated, walked on. We admire them. We say they're good people, but deep down, we know something's wrong, because the world doesn't reward goodness. It rewards strength. History doesn't remember the harmless. It remembers the dangerous, the ones who spoke out, who disobeyed, who were willing to stand alone. So why does society keep insisting that being nice is a virtue? Why do we teach our children to always say sorry, even when they're not at fault? Why do the people who follow all the rules end up the most broken? What if goodness isn't what we think it is? Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Morality is the herd instinct in the individual." He believed that what we call good is not some eternal truth, but a survival strategy created by the weak to protect themselves from the strong. It wasn't born from compassion. It was born from fear. This idea isn't just uncomfortable, it's dangerous, because it flips everything we think we know about virtue, ethics, and power. It means the people we label as bad might simply be free. It means the people we admire for their purity might just be afraid to live. And it means the greatest lie we've ever believed is that being good makes you safe. So what does that make us? A society of good people, afraid of their own strength? Nietzsche believed that the highest virtue wasn't obedience. It was self-overcoming. To become what he called the Bermensch, the one who creates their own values, who lives without apology, without begging for permission to exist. But in a world that punishes truth and rewards conformity, the ones who refuse to play nice are the ones who survive. This isn't a story about morality. It's a story about power, and how goodness became the perfect disguise for weakness. Most people believe that morality comes from goodness, that kindness, humility, and selflessness are eternal truths. But Nietzsche believed otherwise. To him, morality wasn't a gift from the gods. It was a weapon forged by the powerless to survive the powerful. He called it slave morality. It began, he said, not with love, but with hatred. In the ancient world, strength was celebrated. The warrior, the conqueror, the creator, they defined value. They didn't ask for permission. They didn't beg to be understood. They imposed themselves on the world. But those who couldn't win, the weak, the outcasts, the oppressed, they had no power to fight back, so they did something else. They flipped the script. They said, "We are not weak, we are good." They called their powerlessness humility. Their submission became righteousness. Their inability to strike back became forgiveness. They labeled the strong as evil, the ambitious as arrogant, the self-reliant as sinful. This was not morality born from truth. It was morality born from resentment. Nietzsche called this resentment, a quiet, seething hatred of those who possess what we cannot. Instead of overcoming their suffering, the weak redefined it as sacred. They created a world where the lamb is superior to the lion, where sacrifice is nobler than strength, where the meek inherit the earth. And for centuries, this inversion ruled Western culture. It shaped religion. It shaped politics. It shaped the way we see ourselves. But Nietzsche didn't admire this. He saw it as a revolt of the slaves, a rebellion of the weak against the natural order. Because when you tell a person that being strong is a sin, you make them ashamed of what they truly are. You take their instincts, pride, ambition, power, and poison them. You turn vitality into guilt, will into submission, life into apology. And the result? A world full of good people who are terrified to be anything else. People who smile while suppressing their anger, who apologize for wanting more, who hate those who dare to rise above the crowd, because deep down, they wish they could do the same. Nietzsche didn't believe in cruelty, but he believed in honesty. And to him, the greatest dishonesty was a morality that rewards weakness and punishes strength. He wanted to destroy slave morality. Not to empower the cruel, but to free the capable. Because morality, when built on fear, doesn't elevate us. It traps us. It teaches us to resent those who shine too brightly, to envy the free, to punish those who don't need our approval. And perhaps worst of all, it teaches us to fear ourselves. Our impulses, our hunger, our truth. So if we want to understand why good people are often the weakest, we have to ask the question Nietzsche asked over a century ago: is our morality a reflection of what's true, or a defense mechanism for what we lack? It's easy to blame morality, but what if the problem runs deeper? What if being a good person isn't just about belief? What if it's about fear? From the moment we're born, we're trained to behave, to sit still, to raise our hand, to say please, sorry, and thank you, even when we don't mean it. We're told that nice kids get rewarded, that quiet kids are easier to love. That we learn that being accepted means being agreeable, not too loud, not too proud, never difficult, never different. And it works. We get praise, we get approval, we feel safe. But over time, something happens. We lose our edge. We suppress anger, even when it's justified. We silence opinions, even when they're true. We say, it's fine, when we're breaking inside, because the alternative might upset someone. This isn't kindness. This is psychological self-erasure. Studies in psychology reveal something disturbing. People obey authority, even when it goes against their conscience. In the Milgram experiment, participants were willing to administer what they believed were deadly electric shocks, simply because an authority figure told them to. They weren't monsters. They were good people, trained to obey, conditioned to avoid conflict, terrified of being wrong. And that's the terrifying part. Goodness, when built on obedience, doesn't produce virtue. It produces compliance. We learn to smile when we're uncomfortable, to tolerate abuse in the name of keeping the peace, to follow the crowd, even when the crowd is marching toward madness, because standing up is risky, because saying no feels dangerous, because rocking the boat could mean rejection. And so many good people never truly live. They don't speak, they don't challenge, they don't grow. They become experts in making others comfortable, while quietly suffocating in their own silence. This is the psychology of suppression. It's not about morality. It's about survival. Being good becomes a mask, a performance, a strategy to avoid punishment and gain approval. And over time, the mask becomes permanent. But here's the cost. If you never risk being disliked, you never become someone worth respecting. If you never say no, you never know what you truly stand for. If you never break the rules, you never discover who you really are. This is the hidden tragedy of moral conditioning. It doesn't create people who are strong enough to lead. It creates people who are too afraid to be real. So the question isn't just, are you good? It's, are you free? Or have you become so good that you no longer know who you are? We think evil comes from bad people. But more often, it comes from nice ones. The ones who smile in meetings while injustice unfolds. The ones who look away during cruelty. The ones who say, it's not my place, or I don't want to cause trouble. We don't call them villains. We call them polite, cooperative, respectful. But behind that civility is a silent betrayal. In 1961, political theorist Hannah Arendt attended the trial of Adolf Eichmann, one of the architects of the Holocaust. She expected to find a monster. Instead, she found a bureaucrat, a man who wasn't hateful or sadistic, just obedient. A man who followed orders, filled out forms, kept things running. She coined a chilling phrase, the banality of evil. Evil, she said, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's efficient. Sometimes it wears a suit, and it's often enabled. By good people who stay silent, niceness can be a shield. It can hide cowardice behind charm. It can turn the pursuit of peace into an excuse for moral passivity. When someone bullies, and no one intervenes, niceness loses its virtue. When an institution covers up abuse to protect its image, niceness becomes corruption. When a culture prioritizes comfort over truth, niceness becomes a threat, because evil doesn't need your loyalty. It only needs your compliance. The Stanford prison experiment showed how ordinary people, when placed in roles of power, quickly turned cruel, but even more disturbing were the ones who watched it happen and did nothing. The guards who didn't act, the bystanders who didn't speak. They weren't sadists. They were just good people who didn't want to make waves. Niceness becomes tyranny when it's weaponized to silence dissent. When honesty is labeled rude. When passion is called aggressive. When truth is seen as dangerous. And slowly, the world begins to rot, not because evil men rose to power, but because decent ones never stood up. We teach people to be agreeable, but we don't teach them to be brave. We teach them to be tolerant, but not how to recognize when tolerance becomes complicity. Good people often believe that conflict is wrong, but sometimes the refusal to confront is the most dangerous act of all, because when morality demands silence, it becomes a tool for control. And when being nice is more important than being just, you get a world where evil thrives not in the shadows, but in the open, smiling, well-mannered, and completely unopposed. What if everything we've been taught to admire, humility, sacrifice, obedience, isn't virtue, but fear in disguise? To Nietzsche, the highest goal wasn't to be good. It was to be strong. Not strong in the way of tyrants or bullies, but strong in spirit, strong enough to create your own values without needing permission from the herd. He called this ideal the Bermensch, not a perfect man, not a master of others, but a master of himself, someone who has outgrown the morality of the masses, who doesn't ask, is this good? In the eyes of others, but is this true? To me, the Bermensch doesn't live to be liked. He lives to be authentic. He doesn't follow rules blindly. He challenges them, not out of rebellion, but because he knows truth doesn't come from consensus. This isn't arrogance. It's self-overcoming, the process of constantly confronting your fears, your doubts, your comforts, and destroying them. Most people avoid this. They cling to what's safe. They hide behind moral codes, social approval, tradition. They say things like, you can't do that, or that's not how things work, because they've never dared to question the system they were born into. But the Bermensch does. He isn't afraid of being hated. He isn't afraid of being alone, because he knows that truth often requires isolation, and that strength is forged in solitude. Nietzsche believed that only by facing chaos could we find meaning. Not by avoiding pain, but by going through it, voluntarily, consciously. One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. To Nietzsche, the weak avoid suffering. The strong transform it, and that's the difference between mere goodness and greatness. Goodness, as society defines it, is passive. It's about fitting in, following expectations, being non-threatening. But greatness is active, it's creative, it's disruptive, it's dangerous. The Bermensch is dangerous not to others, but to the status quo. He reminds the world that strength isn't a sin, that ambition isn't evil, that becoming who you are may require betraying everything you were taught to be. And that's terrifying, because if Nietzsche is right, then the systems built on conformity, schools, religions, governments, aren't raising individuals. They're manufacturing obedience. They're breeding good people to keep the world quiet. But the Bermensch cannot be controlled. He is not ruled by guilt. He doesn't seek validation. He doesn't need a savior, a master, or a moral leash. He is his own authority. and that is the highest form of power. Not dominance over others, but sovereignty over the self. So when we ask why good people are often the weakest, Nietzsche would say, because they've surrendered their strength. In exchange for acceptance, they've chosen to be liked rather than be free, and until they confront that, they will never become what they were meant to be. In today's world, weakness isn't just tolerated, it's celebrated. Victimhood is rewarded. Fragility is amplified. Insecurity is paraded as authenticity. We don't just empathize with pain, we elevate it. We call it bravery to confess powerlessness. We label strength as toxic, ambition as oppressive, confidence as narcissism. It's a strange reversal. We've built a culture where being broken gives you moral high ground, and resilience is suspicious. Nietzsche saw this coming. He warned that as traditional morality eroded, the vacuum would be filled, not with liberation, but with nihilism. A world where no truth is certain, where values are fluid, where meaning is outsourced to the collective. And in that void, something sinister takes root, a morality of weakness, a worldview that tells people they are forever victims, that their trauma defines them, that power is always abuse, that those who rise must be brought back down. This isn't compassion, it's control, because a society that worships weakness is easy to manage. People who believe they are fragile don't challenge authority, don't take risks, don't create. They consume, they comply. They wait to be rescued. And so we've created institutions that protect fragility instead of fostering strength. We pad the world with trigger warnings, safe spaces, and slogans, while quietly teaching people that life itself is a threat. But the world is not safe. It never was, and the lie that it should be only makes us weaker. Nietzsche feared that modern man would lose the will to power. Not the desire to dominate others, but the deep, existential drive to become. To strive, to suffer, to transform. Without that will, we become hollow. Not evil, not corrupt, just numb, distracted, anxious, depressed. Because deep down, we know we were built for more, but we were told that striving is selfish, that standing tall is arrogant, that daring to live boldly makes others uncomfortable. So we shrink, we apologize, we perform goodness while secretly resenting the life we're not allowed to have, and society loves this version of us. Predictable, harmless, safe, but Nietzsche didn't want safety. He wanted truth. And the truth is, weakness is not a virtue. Virtue is courage. Virtue is integrity. Virtue is strength under discipline, not crying on command, not shaming the strong, not building identities out of wounds, because healing requires something that modern culture avoids, responsibility, not for what hurt you, but for what you choose to do with it. And that choice is the foundation of freedom. If we want to rise, not just as individuals, but as a civilization, we need to abandon this false religion of weakness. We need to stop rewarding victimhood and start cultivating character. We need to stop asking, how can I avoid pain? And start asking, what pain is worth enduring for something greater? Because in a culture that fears strength, every strong person becomes a threat, unless they remember who they are. You were not born to be good. You were born to be whole. To carry the light and the shadow. To be kind, yes, but also dangerous when it matters. To feel deeply, but never be ruled by weakness disguised as virtue. We live in a time where conformity is sold as compassion, where obedience is mistaken for morality, where being passive is applauded as maturity. But that is not growth. That is sedation. Nietzsche didn't want to burn down morality. He wanted to rebuild it from the inside out. He believed in something more powerful than niceness, the will to power not over others, but over yourself. To choose who you are, to shape your own meaning, to reject the soft chains of victimhood and stand up as a creator of values. That is the path of strength. That is the path of the Bermensch. And no, it is not easy. It means being misunderstood. It means being alone. It means looking in the mirror without flinching. But it also means this: you are no longer a slave to the world's expectations. You do not live to be approved. You do not apologize for your hunger, your vision, your force. You rise, not because you are without fear, but because you are no longer defined by it. The world doesn't need more good people who say nothing. It needs awakened people who speak what is true, who act when it's hard, who carry strength, not to oppress, but to protect. And if you've ever felt that pressure, to be agreeable when your soul screams otherwise, to be small so others feel big, to stay silent when truth demands your voice, then you know, being good isn't always good. Sometimes it's a cage, and the door is open. The question is, will you walk through? Because in a world that rewards weakness, the greatest rebellion is to become strong, truly strong, not cruel, not blind, but rooted in truth, fiercely alive, unapologetically yourself, not a servant to the world's morality, but the author of your own.